Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. Hello, Ben. Footy's back.
G'day, mate. Footy's back.
Yeah,
Footy's back. Put 2 points. Move on next week. It's great result.
36 points for a whole match, Ben. That's a Freo score.
We'll take it if it results in 3 points.
Hey, I've got a multiple choice question for you, Ben.
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
And I haven't prepped you for this.
No, you haven't.
Tonight,
Yes.
will you be watching A, the football, or, and this is a loyalty question, all right?
No.
So just prepping you for this. So
Yeah.
A,
I didn't even know there's a game on tonight.
I
thought Friday
the
night.
footy. All right, we'll just keep you informed.
Right.
And B, the return on the ABC of Escape from the City.
Oh.
Which will you be watching? A or B, Ben? So
Well,
no pressure.
It'd definitely be the footy, Bryce. Because I love catch-up television on iView. Oh. So I'd be watching you on demand.
Mate, I'm not sure how I feel about
Are
that.
you you hosting tonight's show?
That's not important.
It is important.
What is important is if you're supporting the show I'm a part of.
I'll definitely give you a download. Promise.
No, I'm not presenting tonight.
Okay.
I am coming up in a couple of weeks,
Right,
but I just wanted to
But
see
it's
where.
back. Good to see.
I just wanted to see where your loyalties lie.
Yeah, definitely with you and the Pies.
Well, clearly you
But
don't.
look, who's playing tonight?
Don't you know?
No.
It is. Neither do I. It's not Fremantle. Let me promise you. They've played Port Adelaide.
Well, it's Pies and Saints tomorrow night, Friday night football.
Yeah, so it's someone's playing tonight, and it's one of the big clubs because it's never the little clubs.
Okay.
But I was just searching tonight. Tonight we're in Shoalhaven.
Okay. I thought you were searching for who's playing the footy. I think
it's
people want
not a
to know
footy
who you're in
podcast.
Shoalhaven.
It's not a footy.
Who's playing tonight?
Oh,
You're going to have to find out.
Seriously, I thought you would be all over this.
No, I follow my football team, and I enjoy the whole contest. But
tonight it is Richmond v Hawthorn.
Oh, thank you. Good to know.
There you go.
There we go. Thursday night football.
All right, a couple of things, Ben. So there we go. So the multiple choice, you failed that, by the way.
Sorry.
The right answer, even if you're lying,
I'll give
would have
you
been
both downloads.
So
Right? The AFL needs the extra revenue from the TV rights to pay their players, and I know I'll catch up on your on-demand television.
So what I'm saying to the crew who are listening to this podcast, if you are not a footy lover, we would appreciate the love over on Auntie for Escape from the City.
Sounds
so
good.
Go and check that out. Hey, you've got a webinar coming up for Pickup, Ben.
I do.
With Elisa.
Yes, with
Or Eliza.
Eliza.
Sorry, my bad.
Eliza Owen, who's the head of research in Australia for CoreLogic.
Mm-hmm.
So Tim's the sort of Asia Pacific, their APAC head of research, but Eliza Owen is going to be doing Australian property recovery from COVID-19. So she's going to do a deep dive into the data exclusively, Bryce, for Picker members. So you won't even be able to register for this webinar, which is on next Wednesday night, the 24th, 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So it's 7:30 in Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, and then it changes, and Brisbane, and then it changes.
Yeah, no worries.
In Adelaide.
Just in case we couldn't work out Australian Eastern Standard Time. Appreciate that.
Very good.
Yep.
And so she's going to do that deep dive. So how do you get access to that? Well, we are going to email you out the invitation. But if you're not a member, if you haven't paid your $5 membership for 12 months or $20 for 5 years, Bryce, you won't be able to know.
Yeah.
You'll be missing out on a very interesting data. When everyone was predicting big crashes, which haven't happened, she's going to take us into the data to explain to you why. And then we're going to go around the grounds, not just Eastern Seaboard. So if you're not a member, this is a great time to get that membership in, and then you'll get emailed the invites. So there'll be reminders coming through. But if we don't have your email address because you're not a member, you won't get on there. So
Ben, for the listener right now who's thinking, how do I become a member?
Yeah, you simply go to picker.asn.au, click on Become a Member, pay your membership fee, give us your email address because we need that anyway, and then you're good to go.
Good to go.
There we go. So that's my little housekeeping announcement for this week, Bryce.
You make it so simple. I like it, Ben. I will be tuning into that. Don't worry about that.
I will be too. I'm looking forward to speaking.
Hey, just want to shout out to our community, Ben, who we were reading out some reviews, Ben.
Yes.
And we were giving away free courses. So clearly we had a window where we were offering it at a discount, and that window is now passed. But I also want to give away some free ones because there's a couple of cheeky ones that I thought. There was a good one here.
I like giving away free courses.
When someone gave some And I'm saying this because, don't worry, I know that when I read this out, and you'll see, I'm in the same camp as you. But
right, here we go.
This one is Chip Curry.
Chip Curry.
Approaching 300 not out, 5 stars.
Right.
Love the work of these guys, the Stig and the great guests they consistently get on the couch. Critical listening for anyone wanting to invest in property, invest in anything, or make improvements to their household finances. There's value here for anyone in the way typically complex subjects are broken down and explained using basic fundamentals and actionable advice. Admittedly, I listen to about 100 episodes in a month during ISO. All right, here's where the good bit comes in.
Right, yeah.
But does Ben realise how often he says, in terms of what that looks like? In question mark. Did you know that?
So I'm going to put some context around that, Bryce.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm going to say it in the future.
In terms of what that looks like,
in terms of what that looks like, I'm going to put some context around that. So you might hear me say, let me put that into context.
Yeah.
Let me put that. So because I've obviously been saying that a bit too much.
But here's the thing, I'm shining the light on you because I've got many, many flaws. I reckon if someone was going to, he says, I'm too much, you rabbits. So I get that, mate.
In terms of what that looks like.
Very good.
Hopefully I won't say it today.
Keep up the great content, delivering the gold, love the banter and the footy chat, go the Tigers. So there you go, Ben.
Free start and build course.
Free start and build for that.
Reach out to us and we'll get that over to you.
This one is thank you, and it's from Bono is my dog, Ben.
Bono is my dog.
Right, so okay. Fair enough.
Right, yeah.
First, thank you so much for the content you release at no cost. So I've listened to the show for 2 years now and don't think there is anything out there that compares. Applying money smarts. Here's the key to reading this out, Ben. Applying money smarts has enabled me to be in a comfortable position during COVID-19. The rainy day you prepared me for did come and I was okay.
Awesome.
Ben.
Awesome.
P.S. Go Eagles.
Go Eagles. It was going so well until that point.
I know.
Mind you,
how'd they go on the weekend? Just smacked. Oh, that's exciting.
That was exciting.
And then the last one here, Ben. Mortine for Christmas. That's the headline, Ben.
Rightio, yes.
Of the review.
If people have listened to that episode, it was a long time ago.
This is from Gerald.
Yep.
1981. Dear Stiggy, Ben and Bryce, about 1 year ago I started to listen to your podcast and follow the advice of starting from episode 1. We fixed $10 haircuts. What a journey it has been since. Every episode I will listen and say, oh yeah, I made that mistake as well. I've been investing for 10 years now in Europe and in Australia, and loving listening to your podcast made me realise how little I knew and how lucky I've been so far in my investing journey to dodge so many situations which could have been a disaster. Your podcast, your 2 books, Sell and Hold Simulation, your money platform has helped me steering the ship in far better horizons, and could not thank you enough for it. I've been recommending your podcast to everyone who thinks of buying a property, as I know they will make better decisions armed with the property knowledge you consistently share. Now, I have followed a lot of your advice, but Ben, buying Mortine spray for your tenant as a thank you for Christmas? Question mark. Not sure about that one, mate. I have replaced it to buy a bottle of champagne to the tenant and to my property manager to say thank you every Christmas. And I must say, I think they prefer it.
Context. I need to put that in context.
No context. Just leave it at that. So Ben, would you like to, if you wouldn't mind, would you like to let us know in terms of what that looks like?
In terms of what that looks like, context. There was, every year I do an annual review up in one of our Sydney properties, and when I would go there, I would normally head via Bunnings. Now, as we know...
Boys Myer.
What's that?
Boys Myer.
Yeah, Boys Myer. And I would buy some supplies. And part of that would be some bug sprays and some different, sort of stick-on things for walls to hang, prints or whatever it is, right? The M3 stick things on the walls, whatever it is. So it was a basket of goods.
Oh, wow.
But it wasn't
You're generous,
champagne,
man. Right? There's no calling you a slumlord, is there?
There's sometimes I also gave a free week's rent.
Yeah.
That
bit was missed, wasn't it?
I did that a couple of times in the Fundura property that I used to own. So every now and then when I get around to thinking about these things, But yes, I've been called out. Mortein spray.
Mate, that is
Not as good as a bottle of Moe, that's for sure.
There we go. So good update. So folks, reach out to us. We're going to give you free access to that course.
Yep.
We'd love to share that with you. Hey, my mindset minute today, Ben, is yesterday we got, as a group within our company, we got to chat to a mental health specialist.
Yes.
So a couple of things I picked up from that. Well, one in particular was the concept around mental wealth, Ben.
Mental wealth, yeah, I like it.
So mental health, but mental wealth. So clearly we look at our assets and everything in terms of measuring our wealth. But
Your
what about
health is your wealth?
Yeah. So I just wanted to flag for people to think about that this week in terms of how is your mental wealth? Are you wealthy mentally or are you poor mentally? So, and part of the exercise was to go through and shine a light on what it means to be through COVID, Zoom fatigue, all those sorts of things, and some of the challenges that people might be facing. So some of our listeners may relate to that. But it was also around prioritising, your mental wealth, and through staying in the moment. There was a meditation exercise and a mindfulness exercise, which some of our listeners will be all across, and other listeners will not be as much across.
Correct.
But it prompted me to think about, if mindfulness is about staying in the moment. I know you enjoyed watching it as I did, The Last Dance on Netflix, which was the story of Michael Jordan, and how
Chicago Bulls.
On a side note, how lucky were we to
live through that?
To live through that, I count myself so lucky that I actually was a basketball fan, just absolutely fanatical about basketball during the 91 to 98 period when he won the six.
Yep.
And also Shane Warne, we got to see him live. It's not just a story that the kids tell.
Yep.
But there was a point in the last episode, you might remember, he's playing on a piano, he's got his cigar and everyone's around him, and someone asked him about next year and he goes, no, just stay in the moment. And he was just playing it up, and they talked about how he had an unbelievable ability to stay in the moment. He never feared taking the shot, he never projected any anxiety around taking a shot, because he said, why put any energy into a shot that I've never taken? So
love it.
So again, just all the theme around today is just to make sure that you prioritise your mental wealth by staying in the moment and doing whatever you can to be mindful, Ben, of making sure that you build that up. So there we go.
Excellent.
Hey, today's Q&A day, Ben, what we did is we went into the Facebook realm, Ben.
Okay.
We went out to the socials and we said, let us know what questions are on your mind at the moment, because we've got a few questions that we're going to go through today, so we're going to do that, and it's going to be a bit of fun. So the first one, and I'm going to probably muck up this name, all right?
Sure.
But I'm going to give it a go. This one's from Angevin, who is on Facebook. Guys, we're very clear that you aren't fans of off-the-plan buying. However, can you please provide insight when this strategy could work, please? For example, blue chip location, for scarcity, well sought after, low availability, small blocks. So Ben, we have actually talked about this in the past, and I thought it was important to chat about now, because for a couple of reasons. Because first of all, I want to be very clear on why we aren't fans of off the plan, and there's two parts to it. One is the process of buying off the plan and what happens when you buy off the plan, and then two, typically the lack of scarcity that comes from most off the plan, and they're two separate issues, right? So let's address the first one. There are people right now who have purchased off-the-plan properties some time ago, let's call it 2017, who are now coming up to a scenario where we are now in a COVID environment where the valuations are now, in some cases, up to 25% lower, Ben. So they're scrambling to actually settle on these properties. And just to help people give an insight as to one of the reasons we don't like off the plan is because you are taking so much risk. You're taking all of the risk. You are buying a concept and hoping that it comes to fruition. And so if you think about, if you cannot settle on a property and it's dropped 25%, in some cases, what are you buying on the East Coast, Ben? Between $500,000 up to, in some cases, up to $1.5 million.
Comfortably,
right?
In some
and even north of that in some cases.
Yep.
So if you think about a 10% deposit, that's a lot of money that you've got on the line.
Yep.
And even if some people only put a 5% deposit, they've still got to come up with 10. So let's go to a scenario where someone is now faced with settling on a property that is 25% below value right now, what they paid for it, and they decide that they don't want to settle on that. Well, not only do they have the risk of losing their deposit, Ben, which is up to 10%, they also need to pay, often not known as, they need to pay the marketing costs and all of the out-of-pockets to then get a new buyer. And then in the worst case scenario, Ben, you would have a situation where if someone sells, if someone had a price at this point, it's now 25%
so
lower.
let's say 750,000.
Yep.
And they can only attain.
Let's take 800 for the easy maths.
Yep.
So
800.
25% off, so it's 200 off.
Yep.
And so that's now only worth 600.
Yep.
If they pull out of the contract, not only do they lose the deposit, not only are they out for those costs, but if the developer wanted to go them and they then sell it for 650, Ben, or 625, the difference between what they contracted
Originally
for
signed
at
the contract
800
up
and
for.
what they received,
Yep.
they're also technically on the hook
Yep.
for the difference to
Yep.
mitigate the loss to the developer.
Take the 10% out, but the difference between that, it could be 100,000 plus, if not $200,000 more. It is, and now there's another sting in the tail for this audience as well. The sting in the tail with COVID is no renters in these big, high-density locations. There's just, we're seeing, and which was what we said would happen.
Yes,
we said
we did.
You're going to see
so it's a
vacancy
measure,
rates go.
Folks, it's a measure of the risk. Who's taking on the risk and why you should. So that's one part of the off-the-plan equation.
Yep.
The second part, Ben, which we've spoken about a lot, is around density, right? So medium to high density, and I don't think there's any shadow of a doubt how we feel about that. But I guess the question then comes back to, all right, if we remove all of the risks associated with buying off the plan that we just talked about.
When does it work?
When does it work?
Yeah.
Now, what I can tell Angevin, I hope I get that right, is we buy properties as part of our buyers team.
Yep.
We buy properties that are nearly new. So we might find 3 townhouses or 2 townhouses, or in some case 4 townhouses that are less than 12 months old. But we don't want to be the first buyer. We want to be the second and subsequent buyer because of the fact, the easiest example is when you go and buy a brand new car, you roll it off the lot bin and it loses value because it's no longer shiny and brand new.
Correct.
And so you are paying costs, marketing costs, you're paying a developer's margin, you're paying for all of these extra layers that just come from something being brand new. So again, that is why we steer clear of being the first buyer. But if you are going to go down that path, well then if it is in a blue chip location, Ben, it is one of a few. It's got some form of scarcity or sought after appeal about it. And small blocks low. Well then we're not saying it doesn't work all the time, but we're saying
correct.
If you don't want to slip, don't go to slippery spots. That particular genre and that particular approach to buying has so many war wounds and so many train wrecks, car wrecks associated with it that it's best to steer clear. But we are not saying that 100% of the time it doesn't work, but we're saying in the 90s.
Scarce land is king, Bryce. Scarce land is king. So, when has it worked for those people who have bought off the plan and had a capital gain and got a return on investment? It's worked in locations which are never to be built out locations. So the land is so unique, and I refer to the Toaster, which is the block of apartments that sort of separate Darling Harbour from the Opera House, and so that's an incredible aspect. There's only that parcel of land. No one else can come along and take that piece of land. So it's a signature site, and that signature site has performed well. But you only need to go 5 streets back, and it's just general high-rise, and there's high-rise around you, and your views are limited and blocked out. You are going to struggle with an asset like that in terms of getting that scarcity value, because technically the land is not scarce. The other times that we were referring to, if scarce land is king, if I want to go and put a duplex on a site which is off the plan in an established area, and there's not a lot of that type of accommodation available, and that's becoming the norm to attract the more affordable buyer in to get into the best location they want to be in because of the aspirational value of it, they could work as well.
Owner-occupier appeal rather than investor appeal.
Correct, correct. But where we see most blood on the streets, Bryce, is in these manufactured estates that are going to have multiple towers or high density accommodation, even if they're only medium in size. When we say medium in size, maybe 100 apartments, but rows of them. And then it builds up as it gets into the middle part of the design community, and then you've got the high rise in the centre. That's the problem. There is where and then no no design elements that give it any type of character, any type of appeal. They're the types of things that would always degrade that. So there are some off-the-plan developers who really do work very much on providing a signature asset, but also on signature dirt, on the best dirt that they can find that it won't be replicated.
Yeah.
They're the type of aspiring assets that may give you a return, but you're going to pay a premium for them, in terms of getting into those locations. And that's why, generally speaking, we do not like them from a return on investment point of view.
And it's probably fair to say that, that what you described is really an owner-occupier driven brief rather than an investor brief, because the investor doesn't want to pay the premium. They want to actually still get a return on their investment. Whereas if an owner-occupier, like you say, the developer's built something that's got some form of signature, which means the one next door is not the same and the one at the back is not the same. So therefore, there is that unique scarcity of the architecture, not just the land. That means that they want to go for it. But investing is about getting a return on your investment, Ben.
Correct.
And it's about the best return on investment, considering opportunity cost of that one versus that one. So
land scarcity, and we talk about it, you said it all the time. We want owner-occupier appeal. We want owner-occupier appeal. Those two combinations underpin the demand for the location, and that's what pushes pressure on value over time. If there's no scarcity of land, if there's no scarcity in terms of the accommodation or choice of accommodation in that location, and it can be forever built up, then you're always going to be at risk of a lower return. And I think that's really important.
Ben, it's also why location only does 80% of the heavy lifting, not 100%.
Correct.
Because if you get the asset wrong, you'll stuff it up.
Well, that's why we like scarce assets. It's a bit like historical cars and things that aren't replicated easy over time, over 50, 100, 200 years. Those scarce character items do actually have some intrinsic value in them. They have some unique appeal because they are rarer. And the rarer that they are, like rare minerals and all of those types of things, they have a value attached to them. So that's the combination that makes up the price of residential property. Economists get that wrong a lot. A lot of general commentators get that wrong a lot because they don't understand that the marketplace of the buyer is an emotional buyer. The same thing in regards to the artwork and those types of things that come up from time to time.
Yeah, so there you go, folks. We probably have answered this question. We're at episode 291, Ben. We've probably answered this question a lot, and we'll probably continue to answer it a lot because we've said it so much we think everyone knows, but it's probably only when we start to get to the point where we feel like we've said it so many times that everyone knows it, that everyone's starting to get it. Because the amount of times we've heard people say that to us, and then ask us, hey, we understand your concept, we understand the principles, but by the way, what do you think about this property? And I look at it and I go,
didn't we just say...
Is that possible that we're even having this conversation?
Look, I think we're going to see less investor activity in the market. I think we're going to be owner-occupier. There's going to be a lot more owner-occupier buyers, which is going to drive that demand. We're definitely seeing first-home buyers in evidenced in our business in terms of coming in and having inquiries with it. This is going to be an owner-occupied-led recovery. It's not going to be an investor-led recovery. And that's because the vast majority of investors are still buying the crap, right? The stuff that doesn't return because they're sold a pup. And that's the problem. And so our vision for the people who listen to this is to get the facts right, go and do your research, go and have a look at the sold and have a look at the resale and what they sold for. Have a look at the, CoreLogic has an amazing report, basically the winners and the losers report. So that's the type of thing that we're talking about here. And the vast majority of them show up as losers in the rental side of apartments, not necessarily in houses or townhouses or in the old flats or villas as we call them. It's usually all of the negative returns on equity come from those high-rise and medium-density apartments which are oversupplied.
There's probably an opportunity too there for first-home buyers may see an opportunity if the market does come off, if they want to buy that stock, knowing that that's the only way they can get in a price point, but it's not necessarily going to be investment grade because the first, we've said it a few times, the first, and that's an important point for the first is to make sure they don't get seduced by this.
Yeah.
Because if they solve the problem of getting into the market, it might not necessarily solve the problem of the second, third and fourth purchase because the way you set yourself up on that first purchase really does set the trajectory of your ladder climb.
And just because it was once sold at $800,000 and you picked it up for $600,000 doesn't necessarily mean it's going to race back to 800,000.
No.
And then the other also...
Just means you've got a roof over your head.
And the blind spot there is also around the holding costs. Whether you're owner-occupier or investor, if you're in a high-rise and you've got concierge and you've got all of the ancillary costs of running that high-rise complex, just be mindful that your management fees and your body corporate fees and all that will be significant.
In some of those blocks, you could have your mortgage fully paid off and still feel like you're making a mortgage payment, Ben, with the amount of additional costs that you do.
Great point.
Kieran Walters has asked this one, Ben. Is turning, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to read it word for word because there's a bit of colloquialism about the way that Kieran asked this question, but I'm just reading word for word. Is turning your super into an SMSF to borrow and build property a good idea? My mate at work got sold the pipe dream by his brother-in-law to do this. He tells me he's building dual key units and that it's eventually going to net him $300,000, Ben, per year based on rental growth forecasts, !
300,000.
Let's just pause on that for a bit.
Pause.
That's like, we talk about 2,000 a week, that's like, that's 6,000 a week.
Is that in 2120? not in this.
All right, let's treat
this 100 years.
Let's not be judgmental, Ben. Let's play this one out. Yep. I've told him. Oh, hang on. I have told him this is not believable.
Yep.
Okay, so that backs up our scepticism, Ben. Turns out his brother-in-law, who convinced him to do this, is getting $60,000, Ben, in kickbacks, and is going to split it with him. Oh, that's kind. He's sharing it. He also tells me his interest rate is 5.7%, Ben. That seems a little bit high compared to what people can get.
In super lending, it's around the mark.
Good point.
So
good point.
That's something to be
5.7% because apparently no one lends to trusts cheaper than this. Yep. He also, and this is where I'm colloquialism, he also pays some bird $3,000 per year who will sort any issues he has, in inverted commas, on top of the property manager. So there's an extra $3,000 per year, Ben. So that's nice little cream there. And there is a snake finance broker, as he referred to it in brackets, in there somewhere who I reckon stitched him up on the interest rate. What happens when all this falls over and the money you put into your super each year doesn't keep up with repayments, Ben? There is a $25,000 limit on how much super you can put in without big tax dollars. So what then, question mark?
Now, Bryce, that was interesting when you've read that out. I picked up an email from one of our property advisors who sent it through to me only a couple of weeks ago, and on a similar type of theme. And I think this is the problem with unregulated property investment market, right? We get these pretenders, these players, these people who don't know what they're doing. But this one reads, I got an email the other week from one of our clients. They've gotten involved in a property investors meetup group. Ooh. So I'm not going to say the location because it's got the location.
It's not
there,
fair.
right?
Yes.
Property investors meetup group, right?
So suburb has been deleted,
or state or city or whatever, right? So they've got involved in there, led by, and I won't mention her name as the mentor.
Yep.
And it stated that they've found a loophole.
Oh, loopholes.
Loophole.
Everyone loves a loophole.
In SMSFs, in SMSFs, that their accountant / close friend / confidant, and that loophole will allow them to develop a property in Geelong.
Oh, okay. Down my way, then.
So all of a sudden, when people talk about loopholes, these are the types of things, please people, do not trust these people. They are self-interested. They are getting a gain out of this. You want to be able to get the full disclosure. And it goes on to say, another property in Kilsyth or similar to develop with a joint venture, which will give them a 20% return on investment. 20%? So it's this type of stuff that I get really worried about and frustrates the crap out of me in regards to who are they to firstly talk about self-managed super funds, because it's a licensed investment product.
Yes,
and
it is.
You need to be qualified. Now, accountants may be able to be talking about that, but is there a self-interest by this particular accountant? I mean, there is, right? I mean, there's definitely a conflict, because if you're recommending it and you're going to get professional fees out of the ongoing maintenance of or the audit of that super fund, and coming back to our mate's question over here, $300,000.
Yeah.
What people who are not educated, Bryce, are very susceptible to these too good to be true gains. And it's pretty easy for a well-versed person to handle the objections and overcome those with roundabout ways, talking jargon or whatever they do. And that is always the problem. If the return sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And secondly, to that point, I don't want to see anyone who is a novice investor setting up a self-managed super fund. It is the stupidest thing that they could possibly do. You are then the trustee of that super fund. You carry all the risk, all the responsibility, and if you have no skill in this area, even if you outsource,
you'll go backwards. Because the money will sit in the bank.
Correct. You outsource the responsibility. You outsource the compliance piece, but ultimately it still comes back on you. So the tax office and the regulators don't give a crap in terms of who was the so-called professional that tidied up your books and so forth. They're going to go after you, and they're going to penalise you for making the breaches and those mistakes. And even well-educated and well-resourced people, and people like myself, I tipped over the additional contribution that I could make by $1,000, and I thought I'd got the numbers right. I had to pay extra tax on that.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
So I got in trouble, and I'm pretty good at money management. I think I know what I'm doing.
Give you 3 stars, Ben.
Thank you. Out of 5. This is an emerging this is an emerging issue that we've got here. If you are going along to these types of investor meetups, they are usually set up by people that have an agenda. Please be careful in terms of attending those. We do have, obviously, Picker has meetups. We were pre-COVID, and we're now having online educational, but we're bringing professionals in. And if someone is telling us their story, we get them to sign a disclaimer basically saying that they're just explaining their situation. They're not here that there's no other agenda. They're not going to make money out of this. They're not there to promote their business, because exactly that's why these little groups get set up. And then, it's a bit like what's happening on the stock market. Everyone's a punter on the stock market at the moment, because they're all retail investors coming in for the first time and seeing the market move up, 30 to 40%.
Easy money.
And, remember that great saying of one of the best investors, he got into a cab once and the cab driver's giving me share tips.
Yeah.
That's when I knew I needed to get out.
Exactly.
So these are the types of little groups that are being established because the industry is not regulated, and people are going to get hurt, and they're going to get into complex structures that they don't understand, and they don't understand their legal requirements and obligations. So we would say to people, please be very, very careful about people talking about loopholes in the tax system, loopholes in SMSF structures. You are going to get burnt. And I don't care if there's been one success story, because they'll lean on that success story, but for every one success story, there's probably 10 to 20 failures. And that's what we're trying to protect people in terms of, you don't want to lose your super.
No.
I mean, my goodness, if you've got no super in retirement and you haven't put any other funds aside, you are going to be living on a pension, and that money is not going to be able to
The government doesn't have
sustain
big plans for you, Ben, with that
No,
pension.
they do not.
Hey, a couple of clues here too is the 60K in kickbacks, and that just to go back to Angevon's question first around off the plan, Ben. Part of the discussion is around 60K. Now, I've disclosed that I was a project marketer in the early part of my professional life, Ben. The last time I did project marketing was in 2005, some 15 years ago, Ben. So the what I was receiving was $15,000 as a project marketing fee at the time, Ben. And on one occasion I got $25,000, right? And I'm embarrassed about that, right? So, but look, fast forward 15 years, there's $60,000 that people, like $15,000 was a lot back then.
Oh, a lot.
It was a lot. So it's equivalent to what 60,000 feels like now.
They're building a duplex. That's $30,000 per property.
That is a lot of cash. So the people selling the pickaxes in the mining boom, Ben, often made more money than the people doing the mining. So just remember that. And there's also the last part of the question around what Kieran says is, there is a limit on how much you can contribute each year. So quite often these people who are promoting people buying in a self-managed super fund are encouraging them to get in when they've got too low a balance, because it's an opportunity for them. It's usually cash out of your existing super that's going okay, and then put it into self-managed super fund. You're kicking it off with too low a reserve, and then all of a sudden you don't have any buffer within the. It's not like you can throw cash in to make the problem go away, even if that is an option to you.
Well, and I know this couple, right? I've spent time coming back to the email from Joel. They are not sophisticated people. They shouldn't be entering into those types of sophisticated. They had a passive strategy set up. It's that's the problem with passive. People can get a little bit impatient in terms of, and then when they hear a better idea, they want to tact over to that because they want instant riches quicker. And I just say to those people, if your financial literacy is not strong in that particular space, please don't do it. This is going to end in tears and usually then marriage breakdown. The whole
pressure,
thing,
like downstream pressures everywhere. Because there's really, if you think this through, most people, not everyone can be investors.
No.
Of the small percentage who are investors, most of them should be get-rich-slow investors, Ben. And then there should be there is a certain percentage of those investors then who have the knowledge and the risk tolerance where they can turn apples into apple pie, whether they're a renovator, whether there is a property developer where they can add value.
Yep.
But there's never a place for get-rich-quick.
No.
So there's get-rich-slow and then the educated folks who can add value quicker. But there's never a place for get-rich-quick.
You are risking your entire financial future on the chance of artificially inflated returns. That is risk-reward in going into business. I understand all of those things, but please, for the average Joe punter, there are easier ways to do this and sensible ways to do this based on good money modelling and then good planning and good execution, which aren't as risky as what we're talking about here.
And people who are very susceptible to this sort of stuff, Ben, are those folks who might be coming to things a bit late and feel like they've got to catch up for time.
Correct.
And they're doing the old red or black thing.
Yep.
Like they think, I'm running out of time. I really need this high risk, high reward stuff to catch up.
Yep.
If you can relate to that, if you're listening to this, you are susceptible to something that Kieran's just talked about here.
There's that passion coming out in us when we're trying to save people from making mistakes, mate.
Don't make mistakes. What was episode 1? Don't do
dumb things with money. People doing dumb things with money.
290
My
episodes.
life's work, Bryce.
That's true.
Don't do dumb things with money.
Very good. All right, I'll give you a 4 out of 5 then. Hey, next one is from Twee. This Twee came on Facebook recently with us. Remember I butchered his name?
Yes, that's right. Good to hear from Twee again.
Hi TPC team, loving the Money Smart system. Question, this should be a quick one for you, Ben, you can knock it off quickly. When you talk about 3 to 6 months of living expenses, do you typically recommend that calculation on essential spend or both essential and discretionary spend? Ben?
Yep. So if you're very conservative, then it's on both in regards to essential and discretionary at 6 months. If your risk tolerance is a little bit higher than that and you've got a good routine around your money and you're pretty confident in job security and all of those things, then you could go to 3 months on both essential and discretionary. Never should you go on to just essential 3 months. That is too tight because you don't have any breathing space. So that's our rule of thumb. So we'd like to think that everyone would start on 6 months as a minimum with both essential and discretionary, because what can happen is a black swan event, a COVID event happens, you can always reduce your discretionary spending down and that will buy you more time.
Yep, that's the key point, buying more time. Thank you. This one's from Matthew John Yoichi. Hey guys, what is your opinion on the pros and cons of paying interest only versus principal? I'm learning the ins and outs and have seen people succeed in either. Brought this up, Ben, because we've recently covered it in the last Q&A, so just wanted to let Matthew know, just circle back to a previous Q&A around that, because in summary, Ben, typically interest only is for the investors. Principal and interest is typically what you do for owner occupier, but we've got a spin on that if you have interest only and you put in an offset account.
Yeah, you're just trapping more surplus, which gives you more control, which means you can potentially control more assets.
So if you want more detail on that, Matthew, circle back to the last couple of Q&As. This one is from Adam Horben. Do you think any state will emerge from the COVID storm quicker or better off than other states? And if so, will this translate into their property prices?
It's interesting, right? Because the two biggest states, when we talk about, sort of the two big powerhouses, economic powerhouses, we're talking about obviously Sydney and Melbourne. Canberra is probably well poised because it's got government money, so
job
reliable
security,
income. Because 80% of the economy is going to come back relatively comfortably. It's that last 20%, that last mile that I talk about. Now, when you don't have any community spread cases in, say, Western Australia, South Australia and Queensland, and they're trying to keep the borders locked down, the problem with that is that the wealth is in the Sydney and Melbourne markets. If they don't travel up there and spend their money up there, then their economies, which is more broadly exposed to tourism, especially Queensland, may not have that rebound. That last sort of mile of getting that economy back into full tilt is going to be difficult. Now, the good news is on the mining fronts, we're seeing iron ore prices at record levels or thereabouts. So we're seeing the mining sector in WA performing very well. Coal's also holding up, so the Bowen Basin, the coal basins up there are doing pretty well. So those things are going really well, but again, their last mile is tourism. And I suspect that that's going to be the same thing in terms of economic activity for Perth and those types of things. So it's a hard call to know if everyone was opened up and we didn't have a significant second wave, which we're going to have a second wave. There's no doubt about it, but I think we're far better placed in terms of managing that expectation. We've talked about 102 deaths as we go to air today, versus influenza deaths in the sort of 700s, 800s last year, and the year before that 1,800 deaths from influenza. Now, please don't think that this is influenza. This thing is something reportedly is 40 times more lethal.
Exponentially worse.
Yeah, so it's exponentially worse. It has the same sort of spread or contagion element to it. But that's the point we're trying to make here. So I don't know whether one's going to come out better than the other. I definitely know that if a state gets locked down more, then that's also going to be very challenging for that state. It's going to be a slower recovery. You won't see that sort of squeezed U that we're sort of we're hearing from the RBA. But so I'd like to say I knew, but I reckon there's still a question mark in terms of which one's going to come out better.
Yeah, and it goes back to first principles that we've always talked about too, in terms of property prices. What are you talking about? Which sector? Which part? So, but a couple of things to think about. In terms of the stimulus that the government has offered, some states are better placed than others. I mean, house and land package under 750 in Melbourne and Sydney, that's difficult.
Yep.
Versus in Queensland and Adelaide and Perth and Tasmania, it's much easier.
Yep.
Certain incentives are different, the state incentives as well. But look, I'm with you. Where there's job security, where there's an opportunity, and all of those factors that you put in. But I think you've covered it pretty well.
Yeah, and just look, always remember there are markets within those markets, so there are going to be.
That's the key point.
Yeah. So saying Melbourne, Sydney, or whatever, no, we're better off in focusing on demand supply measures at the local government area level or at the suburb level based on property type. You'll get a better result by focusing in on that data, and of course you can get that data through all of our, select residential property research platforms as well.
Yeah, and even for the do-it-yourselfer, Ben, it's not that difficult to go and find out what the demographic and what industry that they're working in, and whether or not they're more likely to be job secure or not. Thinking about the future of the 20s, we're going to be a knowledge-based workforce, so the services industry and versus manufacturing, and I mean, all of the things, all the principles that we've taught for a long time about what you need to do to go and research at the local level. But I think everyone loves a headline, and I think we've been consistent on generalised commentary doesn't help anyone. But there's certain pockets that will do better than others, I'm sure, and it all relates on, as you say, Ben.
Demand and supply ratio. Check it out.
Ben, Shannon Hunter has asked this question. Suggestions on looking into P&I loan for first investment property if little difference in mortgage payment compared to interest only plus offset?
Yeah, well, plus offset's the big variable there. So the answer to that is great. I mean, if you can start paying some principal down because you're in a position to do so, that's good. The trade-off is that if you were interest only and with that additional principal that you would, the deposit that you might have in offset, you might be able to hold two assets over a shorter period of time. I'm not saying go out and buy two at the same time, but certainly it might fast track you into another property inside, say, 3 years or whatever. So I would want to do the number crunching on that. But if you want to be conservative and safe, you would 30-year P&I with money in offset, and it's no material difference in cash flow. But you're confident that you can go back and switch that to interest only if you're going to acquire another asset, because again, that's the benefit of going interest only, is you release more surplus cash and you can put that money to work. But on a 30-year loan term, the principal component is a smaller component at that level. But when it gets down to, you've had the loan for 8 years or 10 years or 20, you're paying a lot more principal, and that's the magic of switching to interest only.
There you go, Shannon. Hopefully that's helped. Damien Ratcliffe's asked, what overall LVR level is appropriate on a total portfolio, including the principal place of residence? Is it simply cash flow related, or would Bryce and Ben recommend not going above, say, 80 or 70% when releasing equity? That's a horses for courses conversation, because we've got clients who have been very aggressive and gone as much as the bank will lend them versus folks who have been very conservative. But I think what I think is a better question here is, what's the end goal? Because conservatively, we want the end goal to be a scenario where you retire out the debt. In most cases, some people won't, but you want to retire out the debt. So largely it's about, well, how many properties do you need? And what are your current income target, time and expense spend? So for some people, having an LVR at 70% is possible. For other people, it's the difference between self-funding or not. I had a conversation with a client, for example, an outlier client who generates a lot of cash in his business, Ben. And so therefore planning is very challenging, because this particular person is literally printing money, right? So what we did is we said, well, why don't you get to a position where you buy an asset, you get it down to break even, which is somewhere between 50 and 60% LVR. Then you can pivot, that becomes self-funding, you buy the next one. So this person can buy 2 properties a year, Ben, outside of buying a principal place of residence.
Incredible.
And a couple of other things. So it is a horses for courses discussion, but wherever possible, we've got this principle that if you can lend to 80% or below, you avoid mortgage insurance, but avoid it when you can, embrace it when you have to.
So you're right. We do have some parameters in our business, some investment rules that we tap out on. So if you've got a high risk and you're looking to be aggressive in your accumulation phase, then you could have a global LVR as high as 90%. Now that is for a small percentage. The vast majority of the people we see comfort in their earlier stages, like again, also about age range. We don't want to be seeing people in their 50s and 60s with 80% LVRs. That's crazy, right? What we then say, global, that is obviously including their principal place of residence. What we would say to those people who are in their sort of 20s and 30s is doing an 80% global position means you're controlling a bigger asset base, which you're getting a compounding return on, including your principal home. Then that's well placed as long as your cash flows are sensibly managed and you've done your forward future planning around the changes in households, around kids and education and all of those other costs. And if you've still got a comfortable buffer there, then push green for go. And you would get more comfortable around your leveraged position the longer that you go. But the earlier you start, the beauty is you don't necessarily have to leverage yourself. Like, look, in my situation, I think my global LVR at the moment probably sitting at around sort of 55%. So I'm going again because I'm in a position to do so. But that's the sort of, I've had the luxury of accumulating assets over 25 years to allow me to be in that position. So that's why start as early as you can. Gear up based on your risk profile and comfort about the level of debt you have based on good cash flow analysis, because cash flow is king. And then if you don't have to go above 80 to get your $2,000 a week, and in a lot of cases you don't then the rest is history.
I don't think it's any secret that our voice is around planning, Ben. So we think that speculation, it doesn't help anyone. So we clearly work out what the end goal is. We draw the line in the sand, and then that becomes the reference point to answer this question, Damien. Because as Ben said, if the line in the sand at this point requires someone to only do 70%, that's all they need to do. But if it requires them to be 90%. So there is no rule of thumb here, because we do not have a one-size-fits-all approach. But the rule of thumb is generally work out where the finish line is and then just work backwards from that so you can know what you need to do comfortably.
Beautiful.
All right, this last one from Riley, Ben, it's from SpeakPipe. Let's have a listen. Hi Bryce and Ben, I'm just wondering if all the government grants that are coming out at the moment, if it's almost a bit too good to say no at the moment as a first time buyer. And I've been looking to get into the market for a while. We did answer this a little bit earlier, and we did answer for a while now. And down here in Tasmania, we can get access to up to $45,000 in grants to build a new place. I know it sort of goes against everything that you taught in your podcast, but I'm just wondering if it's probably now with these grants a better way maybe to get into the market. I know certainly from my perspective that that'll help the cash flow as well, given that'll probably get an extra maybe bedroom and bathroom into the house, as opposed to buying a smaller townhouse type of property close to the city. So just wondering what your thoughts would be on that, if it's now possibly a better option to buying a house rather than buying existing. Thank you. Ben?
Mate, what did we say earlier? Scarce land is king, but what we also learnt a few weeks back is the level, with historically low interest rates at the level that they are, in certain cities and town centres around Australia, regional and also smaller capital cities of islands like Tasmania and so forth, the reality is that you would probably be better off paying the mortgage than paying rent. So if you're getting all of these incentives and you can get a dwelling and achieve the great Australian dream, try and buy in an area where there's not a huge amount of future land release, that would be something, because remember we said that scarce land is king. So yeah, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of all of the incentives that are available to you to get a foot into the property ladder, and that's your base, and then start fight. Because if it's marginal, this is a lifestyle call. But it's also, you're in the market. And I cannot support that enough. Whether you live in Shepparton or whether you live in Launceston or whether you live in different locations around Australia where the numbers stack up, it's great for the local community. It's great for diversity of regional Australia and even some of our, as I said, some of our larger Sunshine Coast, Goldie, Adelaide, some Perth markets. It could be a considerably important decision to make, and I think it's worth running the ruler over. Yeah,
and in some of these locations, the entry level isn't as high as in some of the bigger cities, so you can build equity quick because you've got the ability to have a low repayment. Just one thing to keep in mind, Ben, is that these grants, sometimes people feel that they could use it for the deposit. In some cases, they've got to provide a deposit, which isn't covered to the grants because of timing. So that's something that you need to talk to. Well, we always say an investment savvy mortgage broker, if you're doing it for owner-occupier purposes,
you're basically dealing with
someone who
experienced
understands
broker
the bigger picture of what you're trying to do.
Speaking of broking, mate, and I know that was the last Q&A, but we've got a lot of questions around mortgages of late. And I just wanted to lean in to see whether I can encapsulate these questions. A lot of them around, is it easy to get lending these days? JobKeeper, what happened, assessments of loans and all that. So I want to summarise it in this particular way. The first thing first, expect long delays. The process has absolutely been impacted by a lot of our lenders because a lot of them did have offshoring processing teams in India and also the Philippines and in different locations. So they've also been impacted by COVID, of course, and so that means that those teams aren't processing the number of inquiries, and there's been record refinance applications going through as people reprice to get their household budget in order. Yes, there's no doubt for any new money that has been coming through, there has been increased levels of scrutiny. So the amount of scrutiny that we're seeing for new borrowings is not only happening in the assessment stage, Bryce, but for the first time in my memory, we're actually starting to see some questions that are being asked by lenders around their contingency program. So what is their contingency plan? And so I'll give you an example of some of the questions that we might see lenders asking. Are the applicants continuing to work or operate their usual capacity as advised in the time of the unconditional approval being issued? So this is basically asking, have they had any reduced hours? Have they had any change in income during that time?
Look under the bonnet, Ben.
Are the applicants aware of, or do they anticipate changes to their financial situation, such as their employment or income levels due to the impact of COVID-19 that will impact their ability to meet their obligations under this home loan? So we are seeing evidence of this in terms of the applications that we have to prepare, pre-getting unconditionally approved, but it's that time between unconditional and the settlement of those funds that effectively the lenders are just ensuring that they're being responsible for any changes. Now, what we do know is if there has been an impact and if the customer is called direct, then they need to be aware of what questions they might get asked. Because if they said, "Oh yeah, no, it's been horrible. I've just lost my job. Everything's gone pear-shaped."
Gone to custard. Yep.
Then the bank has a duty of care to the customer to work out whether it's still worthwhile in proceeding with the loan and settling the loan. And we're seeing a lot of evidence of that. Based on what the economic cost is for not proceeding, i.e. loss of deposit and potential risk of being sued, versus settling and then putting into a hardship type arrangement. That's what we're also seeing as well. So your good broker should be asking you questions around this, because it's in their interest as responsible lending anyway. But just be prepared that these are the types of questions that you're going to potentially need to answer if they call you directly, because we've also seen evidence of that as well. So uncertain times, and so this is the sort of additional checks and balances that the lenders are putting in place for any new lending to make sure that they're going to be okay in terms of getting that loan and moving forward with their lives.
Very good. There you go, folks. Hopefully that helps you get some insider's guide on what's going on in the finance industry at the moment. But all right there, folks, I wanted to say thank you to Angevin, Kieran, Tui, Matthew, Adam, Shannon, Damien and Riley for their contribution today. And as always, Ben, we encourage folks to leave speak pipes if you want to hear your question on the podcast. We absolutely love Q&A day, and hopefully that's been of benefit to our entire community. Ben, hey, my life hack today, in fact, Ben, you pulled me aside and said, "Hey mate, I'm going to hijack your life hack today."
Look, this hopefully is probably common knowledge to a lot of people, but when you're Google searching, Bryce, and you put in your keyword search, right, and then you go to the website that has that. It could be a website with lots of text and lots of information on there. And so the word or the person that you're trying to find and the information just may not be available for you. So again, I think a lot of people knows, but there's still plenty of people out there. I reckon 50 or 60% of the population.
I reckon there'd be 50 or 60 people listening who wouldn't know this.
I wouldn't know. Control F, Bryce.
Yeah.
Once you're on the page,
for free,
Control F will basically bring up a little window, and you put the keyword that you're looking for, and it'll highlight that word right throughout that page. And that's a very, very efficient way, and it'll tell you also how many times it appears on that page as well. So that's just a little hack.
I like it.
So Control F on your keyboard brings up a little window, tap it in there, it'll search the text in that document to find the appearance of that keyword or that person or whoever that you're looking for to find out that information. It's a quick way of getting to the source of the truth rather than reading the whole document.
Love it. There you go, folks. There's Ben's life hack. Special guest today on that segment. Hey, speaking of segments, what's making property news?
What's making property news, Bryce? Well, I think it's very clear to see that the market, the Oz Property Alive, hashtag Oz Property Alive.
It's going all right, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going all right. So I just wanted to, hot off the press, the auctions for this weekend. So we can see here Melbourne is expected to see a rise in activity this week as per CoreLogic's data that we've just received. So 542 homes scheduled for auctions across the city. That's up from 471 auctions last weekend.
It is up.
So that's stepping up. And last year, for the same weekend, we had 635 auctions. So definitely moving in the right direction. Sydney, on the other hand,
What's Sydney doing, man?
Well, just remember, they're about a month ahead of Victoria in terms of their openness and what have you. Activity is very steady across Sydney with 532 auctions, Bryce.
Yes.
Now that's down from 545 auctions last weekend. However, 532 versus last year of 558.
Ooh.
So it's almost back to parity.
That's interesting because we're at post-election time this time last year, whereas now we're just sort of in our
Yeah.
we've got our
So what
recovery
you'll
wheels.
see, remember, we said that the values will start increasing from August. Well, prices started increasing from July. So we expect as we watch this roll out, more auctions will start to come on. But I also think with the pent-up demand and what's been sort of been spoken about by the agents is that we'll start to see more listings come on for planning for that August and September spring selling season. And I reckon there's going to be a few buyers out there as well. The other markets, just Adelaide's got 36, Perth's got 12, Canberra's got 34, Brisbane's got 69, Tassie's got 1, but they're just not material numbers to worry about. But we are starting to get back to normal levels, and we're also starting to see that clearance rate sort of hold comfortably in that 60 range, which means that's a balanced market. And so we've moved from a buyer's market into a balanced market, and we expect that dial will move into a seller's market, meaning prices will start to go up later this year.
Hey Ben, one of the emails I got from one of our buyers agents during the week was, hey team, price brackets under 750k open homes in Melbourne went gangbusters over the weekend. One property had 73 groups through the first open. Most agents are reporting heightened activity in the lower end to stamp duty grants and new renovation grants.
Yep.
And then there was a property around the corner from you, Ben, that had a quote range of 1.2 to 1.3. So you think, all right, 1.2 to 1.3 is probably going to go for 1.4, Ben.
Yep.
Went for 1.601 million, Ben.
Yep.
And that was, if you have a look at...
let's put that one in the show notes.
Yeah.
I reckon that is a good one to put in the show notes, right? Because she is a renovator's delight.
Mate, she is totally block value.
You are pretty much
block value for
value
1.601 million.
Yep, and they thought they'd get 1.3s to 1.4s on it. Was that right?
Yeah.
So
1.2 to 1.3, which is a quote, right? So
it's 1.3.
But to get to 1.6,
yep, 200 grand over what they anticipated.
So Krista said, fasten your seatbelt. So the idea is just to again spread the message that. I can assure you from the discussions that I have on a weekly basis with our buying agents team, there is not enough stock of the stuff that stacks up. There is lots of people on it. There are plenty of owner occupiers out there, Ben. Plenty.
We don't want to be people that say, "I told you so," do we, Bryce?
We don't say that.
Well, we're probably going to be in a position that come October, November, December, we told you this was going to happen. So if you are in a position, and this is what I've been saying about, if you're in a position and you're thinking later in the year, move your plans forward. Because if you're going to do it later, then there's every chance that you are going to see a wave of competition who's thinking exactly like you are. So don't think like the sheep. Basically, get yourself out there and start moving on your plans. Something comes up, great. Jump on it. If the quality or what you haven't found it, that's fine. But just be prepared that in the good locations, you're going to be under competition in the second half of this year, subject to no material changes to the recovery program that we're currently on.
Think seagull fighting over a chip, Ben.
Yeah, that's it.
So there you go. Hey, folks, hopefully that's been helpful to you today with those questions. And mate, I appreciate your guest appearance on my Life Hack segment, but mate, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Go the Dockers. See you next week, folks. Hey there, folks. Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.